I'm Roger Timm. As I summarize my 50 years of ordained ministry, I say that I'm bi-coastal, bi-denominational, and bi-vocational. And what I mean by that is I've served both in New York and Pennsylvania, and in California, and also in the Midwest in Illinois and Wisconsin. Bi-denominational, I began in the Missouri Synod, graduating from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. And then in 1980, I switched to the LCA and then eventually became part of the ELCA. Bivocational, as I kind of switched back and forth between teaching or campus college ministry and parish ministry. To be more specific, I began after graduation from Concordia Seminary in 1970. I moved to doing graduate work and religious studies at Union Theological Seminary and Columbia University in New York. Eventually got my PhD through that program in May of 1975. But while I was there, I was asked to serve at a preaching station in the South Bronx in New York, a very devastated kind of area and a small congregation that was kind of struggling. Well, I soon saw there was all kinds of ministry to be done there. And so it ranged with what was in the Atlantic District of the Missouri Synod that I received a call to serve there part-time. And so then in April 25th of 1971, I was ordained to serve there as pastor. So I served in that inner city church, a lot of ecumenical work, a lot of social ministry in the neighborhood. But then I needed a full-time job, and I knew someone who was president of Missouri Synod College in Bronxville, New York, Concordia College. He offered me a job as being the philosophy department at this small college. So it was actually just 3 semesters, I worked there as a philosophy professor. Well, then, out of the blue one night, I got a phone call from California, and I was informed that I had been called to be the pastor of University Lutheran Chapel at UCLA, to be in campus ministry at UCLA. And I said, well, let me talk to my wife. He said, oh, you're married? Yeah, I have 2 children. You have 2 children? Well, the Missouri Synod, maybe still, believes that you shouldn't have to do interviews to hire someone. You trust the Holy Spirit. And apparently they had my name from a list of people interested in campus ministry, and somehow I appealed to them, and so I had that offer. Well, I decided to interview them, and so we visited first, but it was a wonderful ministry. I enjoyed being part of that scene of campus ministry at a major institution at UCLA. A lot of ecumenical work there, a lot of work with different faculty and so forth. But I started feeling that I wanted to use my PhD in actual teaching. I was doing some volunteer teaching, but it wasn't like being a classroom instructor. So I started looking around for other positions, and I knew at that point that I couldn't teach in a Missouri Synod College because they had moved kind of in a conservative fundamentalist direction, and teachers at their college would have to sign a statement affirming that kind of theology. I couldn't do that. Well, I think I applied, first of all, to Susquehanna University, and that didn't work out, but they sent my information apparently to Chaplain David Bremer at Muhlenberg College. And then I was offered a position at Muhlenberg as assistant chaplain and assistant professor of religion. So I was at UCLA from 75 to 80. I began at Muhlenberg College in the fall of 1980. I was there 8 years till December of 88. The first 4 years I was assistant chaplain and 1 year acting chaplain. And then I moved full-time teaching. So again, the whole time I was there, I was assistant professor of religion. Well, in that time when I was just teaching, I shouldn't say just, but that was my full-time job, I began to feel I wasn't satisfying my call to be a pastor. So I did some searching and applied for a job of college chaplain at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I served 2 parishes in the Chicago suburbs, St. James Lutheran in Naperville, Illinois, from 93 to 2000, and Ascension Lutheran Church in Riverside, Illinois, from 2000 to my retirement at the end of the church year in 2011. Again, those were, in some ways, maybe the most rewarding parts of my ministry, to serve as a parish pastor. And we moved to Emmaus in 2013 to be close to our daughter, husband, our 2 grandchildren. Then in 2019, we moved into Luther Crest. I continue to do some supply preaching from time to time, less so during the pandemic, but also some teaching. I've been teaching as part of the Institute for Learning and Retirement, particularly. I was part of an ecumenical group that was very meaningful for me, 2 Catholics, 2 Lutherans, UC Mennonite and Episcopal. And that group did a lot of things together. And one that I was involved in is that we set up a residential treatment center for drug addicts. And I remember one Palm Sunday marching from that house to our church singing All Glory, Law, and Honor in the streets of the Bronx. And so that was a rich experience that way. Part of my PhD work kind of morphed into interest in faith and science. And so when I was at Muhlenberg, I developed a course on religious perspectives on science that I found rewarding to teach. And just one of my favorite memories is I love April Fool's Day. I was born on April 2nd, 40 minutes into April 2nd, so April Fool's has been important. Well, one year, my class for that course, one of the classes fell on April 1st. So I thought, oh, I've got to give an April Fool's lecture. So I had been using the textbook to talk about philosophical background for faith and science dialogue. And part of it was legitimately dealing with Heidegger and existentialism, and Heidegger especially talks about the ground of non-being and nothingness and so forth. So I was really laying it on about nothingness. And if anybody knows Muhlenberg students, they're very industrious and we're taking notes like that. So I went on for a while about that. And then said, well, I want to talk about that great feminist theologian, Dalai Lama. I couldn't go on. I felt so bad making him take all these notes. So I said, April Fool. And one of the girls in the back of the class said, you mean this is not going to be on the test? And I said, no. And she tore out the notebooks and wadded it up and threw it away. Interestingly, after we moved back here, I think it was 2013, I think it was the year of the inauguration for President Williams at Muhlenberg. Charles McLean was still alive at that point, and I was at a service for that installation of the new president. And a couple of my students that I knew from that time were talking with him when I went up. And one of them said, oh, I remember your lecture on April Fools. So I hope you learned something else besides the joke. And so one year, the head of the stewardship committee, who happened to be a pilot, his wife was also a pilot, he said, well, I've got an idea. How about if you do a skydive? And if the congregation reaches the goal, you'll do a skydive. So we'll ask them to take a leap of faith, and then you can take a leap of faith. And I thought that was a clever idea. And so I agreed. At that time, this was in 1993 or so, the first President Bush had done it on his 70th birthday, so I thought I could. Okay? It was the only time in my marriage, now of some 54 plus years, that I ever decided to do something major without consulting my wife. So she wasn't happy, but she went along with it. Well, okay, so we met our goal. So then I was on the hook. I had to do the skydive. And I went to visit the place that did the skydives, and on the wall was a slogan that said, law of gravity strictly enforced here. Well, okay, so what we planned it not at their airfield out in the country, but there was a housing development close to our church it was called Aero, A-E-R-O, Aero Estates, because everyone there had their own private airplane and a hangar instead of a garage. And it was close to the church, so we had there the day it was going to happen, the congregation came there, it was kind of like a picnic atmosphere and so forth. The night before, I had a dream that, and it was going to be a tandem skydive, so I was going to be hooked to the instructor. I had a dream that he forgot to hook me up. But I made sure that he hooked me up. And so, okay, I got in the plane, we go up 11,000 feet in the sky. We had to notify FAA because we were in O'Hare's airspace. So we get up there, they open the door of the plane, and I felt sheer terror. But I couldn't stop, no. They sent along a videographer to make a record of it, and they could see me coming to the door, and the instructor behind me peeling my hands off the inside of the door. Well, okay, so leap of faith from Soren Kierkegaard is the phrase. So as we went out, that's what I said, Soren Kierkegaard. Actually, once I got out, it was beautiful. It felt like flying. You're plummeting to the ground, but you don't sense that high up. And then I pulled the chute, and we came down slowly in the parachute. because of all those two-story houses in that housing development, it kind of blocked the air, keeping the parachute open at the last minute. So it closed a little soon. We hit the ground kind of hard. And I thought I broke my glasses, got heard a snap, but no, my glasses were fine. So anyway, I didn't do anything about it at first. My ankles were kind of sore. And we had tried to make some publicity for our church out of it, so we had invited the local paper to be there. And the reporter was there asking me how I felt, and I said, one small leap for a pastor, a giant leap for a congregation. I said, do you know what that refers to? No. This was in '98, and she had forgotten about Neil Armstrong and what he said in the moon. But anyway, when we were all done, I told my wife, I think we need to go to the hospital. I think I broke my ankles. Well, I only broke one. And I agreed to do this. I thought either I would splat dead or nothing. So it was kind of just a broken ankle. It wasn't so bad. The next Sunday was Palm Sunday. I was on crutches, but I decided to use a wheelchair. And so they pushed me in the wheelchair. I waved the palms as we went in. Well, I could say more, but that's one episode. Kind of an irony is the next year we used a fundraising service that the Synod made available to congregations, and we did much better in our fundraising than jumping out of an airplane. And sometimes, maybe the most important times in your ministry are when you just kind of show up. And what I mean by that is there was this member of the congregation, very active, who was married to someone, and people wonder why she'd marry this guy. They like to go to bars and drink together. I don't think either was alcoholic, but they like to party and have their beer. And he had been Catholic, but he rejected the church. He had been in Vietnam in very difficult situations. He became a firefighter, maybe trading one difficult situation for another, because he was like downtown Chicago in the worst kind of part. But he wouldn't come to church, even with her. On Christmas, he would stay in the car. He wouldn't come inside. Well, he was in the hospital. And I thought, well, maybe I should visit him. I know he's not a member, but his wife's a member. So, I'll visit him. So I walk in. It turned out he just kind of awoke from a near-death experience, and here's a pastor standing there. And so he felt that God was speaking to him, and I wouldn't want to claim that responsibility, but okay, I was there. So he started coming to church, and he came to the office one day, and he said, I feel like God has something in mind for me, that there's something I should be doing. I thought, well, how am I going to answer that? And I can't remember if I actually said this, but the only thing that came to my mind is that he'd be good in a property committee. But he became active. He was hospitalized for something else, and it was around Easter time, and he told the doctors he had to be out in time to go to church on Easter. So he became, a positive person. Well, not too much longer. One Sunday after church, they were sitting in their lazy boys, and he had a heart attack and passed away. Well, he was an active firefighter, and so they wanted to have fire trucks out there, and the bagpipes playing for it. And our church was not big. It had a small parking lot, and it was a compact suburb, so we borrowed another church. And I would not want to say that this is what God had in mind by any means, but a way he kind of served was that funeral enabled me to share his story of coming to faith, and to share it with all his firefighting buddies. Probably knew him more as the partying person, being kind of rough-edged. So it was an opportunity to share the faith. And so maybe that's a special kind of example, but I could probably give many examples where you just kind of show up doing your job, and it means a lot to people. In 1980, when I was leaving UCLA to come to Muhlenberg, and I had to join the LCA, oh dear, the motto for the Missouri Synod that year was, God opens doors. Well, God did, and I walked right through it. But as I think through all those calls, some of them I maybe played a bigger hand than others in kind of arranging it or leading to it. But that call out of the blue to be at UCLA was not my doing. The call from the president of Concordia College in Bronxville was not my doing. The call to go to Ascension was not something I applied for. It came to me. They had gone through several other candidates, and someone said, would this be something you might consider? So I see, and for sure, again, I thought I had found my career job at Carthage College. It didn't work out, and I was, upset that it didn't work out. But as I look at what happened next, they were blessings to me, and perhaps maybe my best times in ministry. So, yes, I think God was leading the way and providing a path. It had something to do with the bishop of the Metro Chicago Synod, because his kids were students at Carthage and maybe knew my situation. But nonetheless, God works through people. And so I can really see that God's hand was guiding me and leading me on a path and calling me to different forms of ministry. So that was a kind of a surprise. Or another one. Some of you may know the name Walter Wangren. He was a friend of mine, a classmate of mine. We went to Europe together after a freshman year of college. He just passed away. But he's a big storyteller. And I'm not a storyteller at all like him, but I felt kind of I've been encouraged to try to tell stories. So I don't know, one Easter, the next Sunday after Easter, I thought, rather than just trying to repeat all the theology, I thought I would tell a story. So I made up this person and talked about this person who had a negative experience with church. Some pastor turned her off, but she came to church on Easter Sunday and was really touched by what happened. And her name was Rhonda or whatever. I made up this name. Suddenly people are buzzing. Who's this Rhonda? And the previous pastor had become bishop in that synod, was sitting there. His wife went, "Was that you?" Well, so I used her from time to time, and people came to know that she was an imaginary person. But I know one person came and he said, "I'm Rhonda." So the way I described her was how she came to faith. And so when I retired, they had a little ceremony after church my last Sunday. And in walked one of the women dressed in this kind of old woman kind of thing and said, "I'm Rhonda." So the point is something kind of innocent and not that spectacular somehow touched some chords. So I guess those are some of the surprises. I think one of my seminary professors taught me that, love the people. And I guess I started, 50 some years ago, just wanting to, serve the church. And then what that meant from 1958, when I started high school, and I went to high school, boarding high school, to study for the pastor, changed significantly. And the church is different now, too, for that matter. But I still think caring for people is the basis for it.